Hey guys, welcome back to the Casual Word and Casual Word Radio. I'm your host, Langley. And again, we welcome you guys back. It's been a while, and we're just trying to get back into the swing of things here. You guys know that I've recently transitioned and moved to St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands. So we're working on getting us a studio, some things back in place for us to continue to give you high quality audio and content. But in the meantime, as so many other people have been doing, we're going to use this Zoom platform to continue to bring you guys some interviews and some interesting people, and hopefully that we can continue to keep you guys encouraged, uplifted, and keep you guys going throughout your day, realizing that you're not the only person going through things. Today, I've got a very special guest. I'm very excited to have Phillip Payne with me. Phillip, thank you for being here today.
Good to be here, man.
So it's a really unique story with Phillip and I. I had posted a video a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. And at the end of the video, I was talking about, I was giving people an opportunity to come out and share their testimony. And I was just saying, if you have a story, if you have something that you want to share, by all means, reach out to me so that we can have that conversation and we can have you on the show and really give your testimony, because we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So with that being said, I'm always encouraged by people's stories, as well as the stories encouraging other people who watch and listen to this podcast. And uniquely, that very same day, I get on my Facebook page and I see a notification. It's, Phillip had commented on a random photo. And I was like, that's odd. I'm not really thinking much of it, but it was him saying we need to get together and do a podcast and have the conversation. So it's unique to see how God moves in what we call kingdom connections. And we talked earlier today about being in alignment. Phillip and I talk offline quite often, and we talked about being in alignment, not only with God, but only with other people. And so Phillip's someone who's very dear to me, and he and I have talked about, not that we've been playing catch up in terms of knowing each other in the spirit for some time now, but we had to wait for our present body and our circumstances to kind of catch up to that connection. So Phillip, again, thanks for being here, man. And
I
you've
appreciate it.
been in ministry for a very long time. You grew up under leadership. You said your father was a pastor. You guys traveled quite a bit. So, what was it like? I don't want to say living in his shadow, because that's not the correct terminology, but to an extent, it was sure difficult growing up with a father in a pastoral role.
Yeah, and to be honest, anybody that's been a PK or a missionary kid, which I was actually both, so I had the double entendre right there of being,
Oh man.
yeah, both positive but then negative in the social secular sense. Because if anybody doesn't know it, I'm sure you may have picked on the pastor's kid that had to live right and everybody could do what they want, and you go to the same church on Sunday and you could do whatever. But and I'm not saying that I'm saying that you're not less righteous. I'm just saying being in a position where your father is the leader of the spiritual fold, so to speak, is that you often come under a lot of bullying at a young age because of that. Because if we read the Bible, we realize it's not all grass and roses. Jesus didn't say, "Oh, you're going to be a king immediately in the kingdom of heaven. You're going to be immediately, instantly transformed into a prosperous King Solomon, on earth." No, it's there's a lot of adversity in reaching our spiritual next spiritual step or being, so to speak, in how we
And
are.
that's important to just not to cut you off, but just
Yeah, go ahead.
to share with our listeners and our viewers. We've talked about this a lot, and it's always great to hear that from someone who I would consider to be seasoned, as you've kind of been in this walk much longer than myself. But we talk about the fact that once you begin your journey, at whatever stage you begin that journey, you have a target on your back. Yeah, it's not rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. It does get more difficult.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So how did you manage emotionally and spiritually, not only with the bullying, but living up to the expectations set on you by your father?
Well, I think first of all, my father being the spiritually mature leader, spiritual leader he was at a young age. And I say this not to say to disparage anybody at a different walk. I'm not trying to compare or judge. I'm saying that certain people reach levels faster because they put in more time to
Sure.
get there. Other people, and it's just like in the business world and the spiritual world, there are pastors that don't grow very much and they preach the same message, and that's fine because but it's all about what we put in, input, output. It's if it's evident in the natural and the secular, then it's got to be evident in the spiritual somewhere, because that's where it all comes from.
Absolutely.
And so my dad prepared me at a young age, being a prodigal son that came into ministry from a World War II vet that was hardened, didn't go to church, didn't believe in God, because of all he saw, turned from God. And my father grew up with a like many baby boomers, with a father that didn't love, that couldn't show love because he had to be tough.
Right.
And to show love was to show death, to show the guy next to you is going to die. The only love you show is, I'm here, I'm fighting for you, I'll take a bullet for you. That's love, not let me hug you, let me cry with you. You didn't do
Right.
that until
Right.
after the war. And so my dad became a sensitive man, and I believe God used a hard man to make my dad a sensitive man that was strong in other ways. And my dad was, the 70s hippie that rebelled, the baby boomers that rebelled after World War II and against the strict, stern fathers that used the belt, right? The rod. And he saw all that. My grandfather was an attorney, was a lawyer, JAG lawyer, one of the most decorated officers in World War II history. He's on Saving Private Ryan. I'll go into that at some later date. But what I'm saying is that my dad prepared me, because his dad wasn't a preacher, but he was a well-respected lawyer and Navy man. So my dad had this huge expectation in the world sense, I've got to live up to James Clifton Payne, lieutenant commander, that worked his way up from a dirt floor to one of the most decorated lawyers in the country, right? And that is a big expectation. But God used his rebelling, his prodigal son turning, because his dad wasn't a spiritual father. So it turned him into, I'm going to see what all the world has to offer, and free love and all that. And God turned him back to his heart. And then my dad, instead of pursuing being a lawyer, being an accountant, being a businessman, my dad chose to forsake all. He was so smart, he could have ran 6 companies, but he chose to forsake all that to pursue the knowledge and scholarly pursuit of God's language, and Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek, and masters of divinity, and gave up his worldly potential wealth for spiritual wealth. And that's part of why I was prepared, because my dad said, when the Bible says turn the other cheek, you may be able to hit him and beat him, but did Jesus not overcome that with love? I've been
Right.
struck, and see, I was taught that I would be bullied. My dad said, you will. I'm a pastor, I'm a missionary. When you come back to the States, where you're kind of glorified as a missionary to people you're missionizing,
Mhm.
which I know that's not a real term, but when you come back to the States, it's gonna, man, you have an English accent, you're 7 or 8 years old, and these guys, when you come back to the South, they're gonna brutalize you because you've got an English feminine quote unquote accent. You know nothing of any kind of history of America as far as experiencing. We talked a little bit and offline about the past of our history of our nation, the disparity of minorities,
Right.
and then all that. And I didn't know that. I did not know hate. My first experience in England, there was no black whites hate each other. It was like, we all get along. It's all, we've been through that way beyond. And so when I came to America, I had no cognition of those kind of disparities. And I want to say, I don't know how to describe it, but we all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Is that I became truly innocent, and when I came here, I was immediately picked on for being a guy in the South that's speaking like some British guy that we're making fun of, that dresses
Right.
different, and is also the pastor's kid. And
So it was,
uh,
I mean, it was all the above in terms of you having all bullseyes on you,
yeah,
all that ammunition from your peers once you got yourself into the United States. I do want to make the distinction, because I think it's very important, something that you said, that as you all know and follow my journey, I'm adamant about men becoming more in tune with their emotion, and being able to
absolutely.
not only understand their emotion, but to properly assess and process their emotions, and then to properly be able to convey them. Because I grew up in a household very similar to what your father grew up in. Not that my father was. It wasn't until much later on that we were able to have conversation that surrounded emotion and how we felt, not only
Yeah.
with each other, but, in society. I grew up in a, you got to work, you got to, provide for your family, and you have to do these things. And my dad was a fantastic man, but at the time he was emotionally absent because that was not how he was brought up. And so it was very difficult for him to be able to help me work through emotions as I was growing up as a young man, simply because
Right.
it wasn't something that he was familiar with either. So not a detriment to him whatsoever, but just the nature of our nurture process at that time. So I want to certainly hats off to your dad for recognizing that and having you prepared for that, because I had to learn that much later on in life, and I had to learn how to deal with that much later on in life, and I'm thankful that I was able to do so. But I
Yeah.
want to kind of talk about that just for a moment, because we talk about, you and I talk about this, being Chesko, Weiniger, all the guys in the wolf pack, we talk about this quite often, and it's something that a lot of men need to hear and be working toward understanding. And that's what we are here for, is to help you
Yeah.
understand that it's not a sign of weakness to have emotion and to show emotion and to be emotional and to love on your children and to be affectionate with them and affectionate with your partner. These are not signs of weakness. These are just signs of strength in understanding and being confident in not only you as an individual, but you as a man, you as a person who's trying to get better and walk in your calling. So I
Yeah.
do want to say to everybody who's going to hear this later on, watch this later on, that please work toward emotional vulnerability. And I know that comes with risk, but dealing with people comes with risk at any stage. And yes, you will get burned. Yes, you will get hurt. Yes, things are going to happen, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to still work toward being able to process your emotions and talk through them, and talk with people about them.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you interjected that point. And I just want to say, first off, I didn't get to really say this because I didn't forgot to say it, but your introduction. I just want to say first off, man, those listening and that know Langley longer in the natural than I've known him, because it's a short time naturally, but like we said, there's a spiritual, Jesus has gone before, this relationship was preordained. And when we met each other, just like any beginnings of a good friendship that's based in emotional vulnerability, that is based in spiritual knowledge, is which we should all aspire to, that's our root, is that that came because what's going on now is him, bringing me on is for such a time as this, as God says, and calling us. And me coming on, I just want to first off say that I'm so glad to be here on this platform, because this isn't just a platform for viewership attainment and all this. This is a God platform, and I knew before I even knew. I had never heard Langley say anything as you want to call Christianese. Is I knew just something told me Langley spoken word Shazor. I added him as a friend because he was friends with friends of mine. Never having come between, we probably have crossed paths and never even known it in the region that I live in. But um, there was something that God spoke to me, and I try to be as spirit led as possible. And prescient in that is that God said, hit that add friend. This isn't going to be an ad friend like, oh, Adam, so I have 569 followers or whatever.
Right.
This is add him because there's a purpose here, and he's in a purpose where you're at. And I'm just going on, okay, God, you're giving me all this stuff. Yeah, let's see it, let's prove it, let's see what happens. And I'm just glad to be here to have the honor to be able to share some of what God's shown me that I've been out of ministry for 2 or 3, 4 years. So um, walking the desert, as Langley's writing a book about, basically the 40, I don't know what your title is, but
Yeah, it's a journey through the wilderness, 40 days.
Journey through the 40 Days and Nights. Yeah, and I thought that's what it was. I didn't want to butcher the title, but I've been in several of those. And if you look through the history of the Bible and through the history of man in spiritual context, you don't just go through 140 days. You
Right.
go through different transitions, and I believe, and I may be wrong, and I am, uh, kind of inferring this from what I read in the scripture and my study of it, is that um, you've looked through Bible times. It may have not said 40 days or a desert wilderness, but no, none of those men went through one desert and then it was over. They would go
Right.
through a desert, they would walk through the valley, they would get on the mountaintop for rest and peace, and then they would go back down in the valley, and then there goes the desert again.
Yeah.
And I believe that cycle never changes until we receive glorification in Christ.
I agreed. Chris Weiniger and I were having that conversation just the other day, and we were talking about when you elevate, you start back at zero. And what I mean by that is, you get to a place and you're working through and you're climbing that mountain, right? And you're overcoming adversity and you're making your transitions, and then you elevate. Well, when you elevate, right, what we say, new level, new devils, right? So when you elevate, you start back at zero, but at a different level. So now
Yeah,
you got to work your way through this enhanced level of adversity. And then when you elevate again, you start back at zero. And the point of that conversation was that everyone is at zero. We just may be at different levels of it. And
yeah,
when you're caring for someone, it's not that they are less inclined or they are less mature. It's just that they're at a different level, and
right,
and you might have overcome that, but remain humble because you're starting over too. You just have more adversity to go through.
right.
So
And
talk about your multiple iterations of wilderness.
yeah, I can get into really scientific quantum theory and zero sum theory and how that applies to God's mathematics and the universe, but I won't do that tonight. But what I do want to say is that being here um, and being introduced together finally in the natural. You talked about, I'll go back to you asked initially about the initiation of my testimony, right? And um, I was a missionary kid in England for 4 or 5 years. So most of my formative young years, being toddler and reaching elementary school, was in a different society with many different rules, different social structures. Um, and I had never really known, even though I was born in America, I had never really known American life. The only things I remember in America was my dad graduating seminary, my third birthday when I got a Hot Wheels, Dukes of Hazzard Big Wheels, or Big Wheels, I mean, the little
The
bike or whatever,
tricycles, yeah.
and things like that. And then it was, I'll wake up, you know how it is when you're a child, you remember certain tangible moments, you don't remember
Yes.
the whole story. It's like a dream with missing pieces, and at least for me it is. That may be just my brain, but um I was born out of adversity, man. The devil did not want me here. I know he says that for everybody. I mean, he I was born cross-eyed. I was born 98% deaf. So I couldn't play music, even though I've been a worship pastor for most of my life and I can hear perfectly now. Um, when I was born with, I don't know if it was, dad told me, I didn't realize this, but I had some kind of deformed knees or my bone structure where they had to straighten out my legs. I wear thick glasses, a patch on my eye. I was stabbed in the eye at age 4. My fourth or fifth birthday, a kid was playing sticks and swords, stabbed me in the eye with a stick as big around as my eye, and it almost killed me. And I, being the kids, like, get this thing out. I yanked it out, which is the last thing you want to do. I could have pulled my eyeball out. I just wanted it out. It broke, and I yanked it out again. So God saved my eye. And this was after 3 surgeries to straighten my eyes. And then even from the womb, I was, even when my parents were trying to have a planned pregnancy, I was born on 3 forms of birth control. So even my parents at the time were trying not to get me
Not to
born.
have, yeah.
So I came out of the womb kind of like Jacob grabbing Esau's heel, like for
Yeah.
the,
Hmm.
I was grabbing the heel. I was like, I'm coming into this world, and God had that motivation even at a young age that I will survive. And I knew from birth adversity. I didn't have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of relative toddler peace before, that cushion bubble before I got
Right. You came in kind of behind the curve. Uh,
way behind the curve.
yeah.
And
So that's
um and
wow.
and then being born almost completely deaf, I could not hear for all intents and purposes. What I heard was only audible when I faced you directly. The only reason that my parents didn't recognize it is because the combination of the intellect God gave me, discernment, I don't know what he gave me, but anointing, whatever, it's probably a combination of all things because they're all come from him, not me. But I was able to read lips, so I was able to unknowingly deceive my parents, right? So they didn't know I was deaf per se. They just knew that maybe I ignored them when I turned my back. They were thinking I was a willful child when actually I couldn't hear
Couldn't hear
them.
it. Wow.
And this in this beautiful time, I call it beautiful because I was in a bubble. It was a bubble of no sound besides my own thoughts. And we may think the first thing we jump to is, man, he probably developed, a little voice in his head. No, you know what happened to me is Jesus purposed that. He wanted me to be born that way because my dad didn't teach me about Jesus. I didn't read the Bible till I was 7. I actually read the Lord of the Rings at 6 years old before I even opened the Bible. And what I learned about Jesus was from him. I'm talking about when I can remember at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, sitting playing with my toys by myself in the backyard and hearing a voice say, "Come play with me." And I'm not talking about a crazy schizophrenic voice.
Right.
And I don't want to disparage people that deal with mental illness. What I'm saying is that Jesus himself was teaching me scripture. And when I actually started to read the Bible
It,
later on,
it made sense.
it was the exact stuff that he was speaking.
Right.
And
So you recognized it.
and not only this, and I don't want to glorify myself. Please don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not some, super mystical person that believes that I had some special revelation that nobody else had. What I'm saying is, for my purpose and what God's called me to do, is to reach unique people that can't be reached in the conventional mindset. And at that age, I had so much joy. I didn't know. I hadn't even started playing music yet, and I've been a musician my entire life. And what happened was, and I'll remember this, and I'll never forget it. Um, my my dad was a deacon missionary at the Baptist Church in England, which, if you know anything about the 80s and 90s, there was no such thing as the Baptist Church in England. It didn't exist. So we were missionaries to a dying Christian religion. And when we had a service, and it was during the 80s, which was the start of the charismatic Maranatha Vineyard movement, right? That was the new revival of the 80s. And while we were in worship, and there was a prayer time, and at this time my parents had begun to decipher that at a certain age I wasn't hearing. It wasn't just a willful ignorance. It was like, literally, I'm screaming at you and you don't listen. So they took me to doctors for hearing tests, and they, evidenced all that was already wrong with me. They proved that. And so they were doing all these tests and what we could do, and getting tubes in my ears and hearing aids and starting to do all this. And before all that happened, at this meeting, my dad and my mom brought me up to the elders of the church, and they laid hands on me, and they prayed just from the scriptures for my deafness. And in Jesus' name, it was spoken over me that I would be a psalmist and a minstrel in God's kingdom. And I had never even touched an instrument, barely, couldn't hear it. And they prayed. That night, I went to bed. That morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. And keep in mind now, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you, I lived in Cardiff, Wales, which is one of the biggest cities in, the United Kingdom, besides London. And we lived right near the main thoroughfare to the castle and the rugby stadium. So it was loud. There were buses going by. I mean, it was loud all the time. And I never heard all this. I never even knew what a bus sounded like, nor a bird singing. And I woke up that morning, and I remember the excitement, but I don't remember all the reactions of my parents. But I ran into the room. It was Saturday. They were dead asleep, sleeping in. And I jumped on the bed and said, "Mom, Dad, I can hear birds singing. I can hear the buses going by. I can hear everything." It was like I had been born. And
Man.
there was nothing done medically to enhance this. This was all literally men laying on hands, believing in faith at a time when believing in the spirit was okay. You just don't operate in it. It's for the past. It doesn't exist. We can't believe in that.
Right.
It happened in the most dead country that had forsaken the religion of Christ.
And what's interesting about that, you being born into the wilderness, and in the book, guys, and we're not going to get into that. That's not what this is for. But I do want to make mention that in the place that I'm at currently in my book, I'm talking about how the wilderness is that place of clarity. The wilderness is by design where you go to reconcile yourself to your purpose and to God and to yourself, and you find all these answers. And so, like you were saying, in a dead place in terms of people not operating in faith and in the spirit, a place that for all intents and purposes was a wilderness. You
Yep.
see this miracle happen, and so that's that, guys, is the crux of the book. But also, even in our conversation now for you all, that's why the wilderness is important. That's why separation is important. That's why having to take time. We talked earlier offline about going into that secret place. We talked about being, in that secret place, and that God who hears in secret will answer you. That's why those things are important, because you have to be able to separate yourself from what I like to call the noise, right?
Yeah,
And even in with your situation, you were separated at birth from the noise so that you could hear. And then at such a time as then, in your wilderness, everything came to fruition.
right.
So
And
it's important,
uh,
guys.
one of the most poignant points I want to make in all this is I'm not anything special. I'm not, other than we're all special in God's eyes, right? So I'm not some special guru that's being born and I'm like some golden child, like the second, coming of, what Jesus should be. But we're all supposed to be that. I want to say that to preface this is I just happen to be chosen. It says many are called, but few are chosen. Langley's been chosen. He has testimonies that are amazing, mind blowing, that I don't even know, and I can't wait to hear more of. But we each have different. It's not better or less. It's not more or different, or I mean more or like whatever. It is a quantification of God likes to work in mysterious ways, in different ways, in supernatural, whatever you want to call it, ways, or use whatever language to describe it. You know, is mine was a miracle, but each salvation is a miracle.
Every time.
When you think about the entire host of heaven and all the angels rejoicing, stopping for a minute to worship God, right? And turning around to say, here's another one. He's coming in. Number one draft pick again. We win again. That is the mindset, because what they're doing is they're welcoming in another Adam the way he was meant to be in the garden. And the whole reason Jesus had to come down and be a man is to bring us back to, and I want to roll this right back into what Langley was saying about being emotionally, I don't know if you said purposeful, relevant,
Vulnerable, yeah.
vulnerable, is Jesus was the strongest sensitive man you will ever meet. And if you meet any combat veteran that has lived and died, and or not lived and fought, and some of them have died for our country, especially the Navy SEALs, they're some of the most timid. If you met them, shook hands with them, not seen their movies, and I've met some of them in person, face to face, they're like the guy you would be like, is this like the runt in the litter? Is this the one? I thought Navy SEALs were supposed to be 300-pound, brutes. No, they're not. Many of them are mine and Langley size, if not less. And it's not about the size of the dog. What is the size of the dog? It's the fight in the dog.
Right,
And
right.
what's the most vicious dog that I know of besides a Chihuahua pretending to
Well,
be
see, that's where
something?
I was going with that.
But no, joking aside, the most vicious dog I know of, and loving dogs and being into dog breeds, is a pit bull. He's not the biggest.
Right.
He is not the tallest. But he is one of the strongest. I guarantee you put a pit bull against a Rottweiler or Doberman, he'll kill every one of them. And I don't mean that in a negative context. I mean that God has created us to be that kind of fight in the kingdom. It's not the strongest lead the strong, it's the weak lead the strong, because in that, when you are less and God is more, you become Goliath times 1 million.
That's right. Because you have God coming first, and you have him fighting on your side, and you allow him, we talked earlier about fasting and how that, brings the flesh under subjection so that the spirit
Yes.
can move. And so, the guys, these are all things that you've heard me say, and I'm so thankful to have Phillip here just to talk more about that. And we're going to have more and more discussions you guys are going to see, especially with us having this ability to speak remotely. It allowed me to have multiple sessions with people, so you guys can, pose your questions. Definitely reach out to us and let us know what you think and what you want to hear about, because obviously there's a plethora of information that he and I can go into, and we want to give you guys quality content. We want to address your concerns. We want to address your questions. We definitely want to be here to be guides and light, and definitely a beacon of hope for everybody who's going through something, because we all are in a wilderness at some point, and we are all in a transition of some sort, and we are all trying to overcome something. And so, we are simply here sharing our stories so that you all may be encouraged, knowing that if we can do it, you can do it. If you can do it, the
Absolutely.
neighbor can do it. If the neighbor can do it, the guy down the street can do it. And that's what it's about. And it's about us sharing that and emulating that love of Christ through service and through even our words, so that, one person can have a changed experience. So guys, that's all the time we have for today. Phillip, man, we're going to definitely do this again very soon, probably
Yeah,
within a week
absolutely.
or two, because you just got so much knowledge and so much experience. And again, this is not to downplay what anybody else has been through, but it's just so unique, the things that you've already gone through in your short life here, similar to the things that I've experienced in my short life here. And again, I thank you so much for being here, man.
I
I
appreciate it,
hate that
man.
we don't have more time, but we definitely have more opportunities. So, guys, Phillip Payne, he's on Facebook. Great man of God, great man in general. We are already connected, a great friend. And I'm thankful for his friendship. I'm thankful for this connection. I'm thankful for us being here for such a time as this, not only personally, but for you all as well.
Absolutely.
Guys, don't forget to check out the 60 Days of Casual Word. It is available on Amazon. Of course, you guys like, share, subscribe. Check us out on all the podcast platforms, Casual Word Radio. Look it up on YouTube, The Casual Word. You guys will be seeing this platform here for a while. I do have some local people that I'll be sitting down with coming up in the near future, but until then, and peppered in with what we're doing here, guys, there's a lot of people back stateside that I wanted to get in touch with that we'll be using this platform for. So be on the lookout for us getting rolling again and really getting these podcasts back up so we can continue to encourage you guys. Phillip, anything you want to add there at the end?
I just want to say, man, like I say, you're a blessing. Everybody out there that's listening to this after the fact, I just want to impart, like I said, our testimony, whether you think it's greater than yours or not. The purpose that God brought me here is to show you that your testimony is just as great. And I want to say, I want to tie this one thing, and I think it's the most poignant thing that I could say, regarding what Langley said and what I have shared, is that I believe that the two greatest things in our life that we've been talking about tonight and touching on is, the two extremes of the kingdom of God and of the life that we walk. Is that the most extreme thing that we consider death, the desert, right? That's where everybody goes to die, right? But that's the truth, because in death, doesn't life come out?
That's
Is
it.
not the water fountain. And the only thing that you look for in the desert is not your home, it's not your possessions. You're looking for just a drop of water. And that, to me, I want people to understand, stop regretting and stop dreading the desert. Embrace the desert, because that's where the King of Kings, Jesus, became the King of King on earth and sacrificed himself. And I believe the two greatest places in this earth before we reach the attainment of heaven and full glorification is the desert and the Holy of Holies, that place where we get intimate with God. Those two places, and I may be wrong, but I feel like those two places are equally the most important place, because in the desert you find the Holy of Holies, life-giving water, and then when you get to the Holy of Holies, you find the relief and the what you were seeking, the fullness of the water. So, and He is the water of life, and we're made of water. So, chew on that for a while.
Hey, man, that is great. Guys, we're going to leave you with that. Like he said, chew on that, be thinking on that. Obviously, drop your comments. Again, thecasualword@gmail.com. Reach out to me if you guys have any questions, concerns, if you have prayer requests. Of course, if you have ideas for future guests or want to be a guest yourself, please don't hesitate to let me know. We'd love to have you, because everyone has a voice. And, this whole platform is designed for us to continue our endeavor to change the world one word at a time. So with that, guys, as always, let's change the way that we think so we can change the way that we live. And until next time, stay blessed.
God bless y'all.